Confidence that terrifies people is quiet, deliberate, and painfully restrained. Most people confuse confidence with volume, speed, and constant emotional display. That confusion keeps them loud, visible, predictable, and easy to psychologically map. Real confidence removes urgency, explanation, and the need for immediate approval. It slows behavior until others feel uncertain about your internal state. Uncertainty triggers projection, and projection hands you invisible leverage. This is where intimidation begins without threats, aggression, or raised energy. People fear what they cannot read, predict, or emotionally access. Your calm becomes a mirror they cannot see through. They search your face for cues, finding nothing reassuring there. That absence of signals feels dangerous to socially conditioned minds. The brain prefers clarity, even bad clarity, over silent ambiguity. When you deny clarity, dominance quietly shifts toward your position. This is not confidence from self-love, affirmations, or emotional expression. It is confidence born from containment, patience, and controlled self-access. You stop leaking information through posture, speech, and reactive timing. Leaked information reduces mystique and hands comfort to observers. Comfort breeds entitlement, familiarity, and subtle disrespect over time. People only respect boundaries they cannot easily step across. Over-explanation flattens boundaries and invites testing from insecure personalities. Silence, used correctly, forces others to regulate themselves instead. Self-regulation is uncomfortable, especially for people addicted to feedback. Their discomfort becomes respect when you remain emotionally unmovable. This respect feels like fear because it removes their usual control tools. They cannot charm you, rush you, or provoke reassurance. So they hesitate, recalibrate, and unconsciously lower their posture. This moment is the psychological hook most people miss. They chase approval instead of allowing gravity to pull attention inward. Terrifying confidence never chases, convinces, or tries to be liked. It allows others to feel exposed beside your stillness. Exposure creates vulnerability, and vulnerability rewrites social hierarchies fast. This is why composed individuals attract projection and exaggerated reactions. People sense power when outcomes are not emotionally negotiated. Your lack of need communicates abundance without stating anything directly. Abundance frightens those operating from scarcity-based emotional habits. They wonder what you know, have, or control internally. That wondering keeps them cautious, polite, and strategically restrained. You did nothing aggressive, yet authority quietly rearranged itself. This is the foundation before confidence ever becomes externally visible. Without this base, confidence turns performative and collapses under pressure. Most people perform strength while begging internally for validation. Others feel that hunger immediately and instinctively recoil. Terrifying confidence starves that hunger until presence alone carries weight. You become heavy in rooms without increasing emotional volume. Weight alters movement patterns, conversation pacing, and social decision-making. People start adjusting before you ever assert anything. That adjustment is respect forming prior to conscious awareness. This is the first realization most never consciously articulate. Confidence is not energy added, but energy deliberately withheld. Withholding changes equations, expectations, and who controls psychological tempo. Once tempo is yours, intimidation becomes an accidental side effect. People call it confidence because fear sounds unacceptable socially. But internally, they feel watched, measured, and slightly exposed. Authority grows when restraint outlasts impulse during socially charged moments. Impulse reveals dependency, while restraint suggests options you are withholding. Options imply power, and power unsettles those accustomed to emotional predictability. That feeling keeps them careful around you without clear reasons. This scene sets the frame for everything that follows. Confidence becomes terrifying when others adjust before you ever speak. The next layer explains how identity locks this advantage permanently. That shift requires discipline most mistake for emotional coldness. Coldness is misread when warmth is no longer strategically available. We start there next, where confidence becomes untouchable. Terrifying confidence stabilizes when identity stops negotiating with external reactions. Most people shape identity through feedback, approval, and social emotional cues. That habit wires dependence directly into behavior and decision-making. Dependence leaks through tone, posture, timing, and unnecessary verbal reassurance. Others feel that leak instinctively, even if they cannot explain it. They sense a need beneath confidence, which collapses perceived authority. Real confidence forms when identity becomes internally referenced and externally closed. You stop adjusting self-definition based on how others respond. This withdrawal removes a familiar control lever from social interactions. People lose the ability to steer you using approval or discomfort. Loss of control triggers anxiety in socially dominant personalities first. They rely on emotional influence to maintain hierarchy and predict outcomes. When influence fails, they hesitate instead of pushing forward. Hesitation signals a silent shift in psychological footing. You appear grounded while others recalibrate without realizing why. This grounding is not emotional numbness or detached indifference. It is selective access to your internal state. You feel everything, yet reveal almost nothing prematurely. Revealed emotion invites interpretation, manipulation, and expectation alignment. Expectation alignment traps people into predictable behavioral loops. Predictability makes you manageable and psychologically smaller. Terrifying confidence resists being mapped by refusing easy patterns. Your reactions arrive slower, fewer, and strategically incomplete. Incomplete reactions force others to finish narratives internally. Internal narratives expose their fears, assumptions, and power strategies. You gain information while revealing none of your own. This asymmetry quietly tilts social leverage in your favor. Most people overshare emotional context to feel understood. Understanding feels safe, but safety kills perceived authority. Authority requires slight distance between intention and expression. Distance creates uncertainty, and uncertainty demands respect. People behave carefully around what they cannot fully access. They check themselves before challenging or dismissing you. This self-check happens subconsciously, without verbal acknowledgement. Identity anchored internally does not rush to defend itself. Defense implies vulnerability to judgment or social loss. Terrifying confidence treats judgment as informational, not threatening. Information can be observed calmly without emotional response. That calm unnerves people seeking reaction-based control. They escalate behavior hoping to provoke clarity or submission. Your refusal to escalate frustrates their usual dominant strategies. Frustration often masquerades as intimidation or discomfort. They label you intense because intensity explains their unease. In reality, they lost leverage and cannot name the reason. Identity stability also alters how time is perceived socially. You do not rush responses to match others' emotional pacing. Delayed response signals internal abundance and external independence. Independence destabilizes group-based power dynamics quickly. Groups rely on emotional synchronization to enforce norms. Unsynchronized individuals disrupt consensus without speaking against it. Silence combined with consistency becomes a silent veto. Others pause before asserting, unsure how resistance will land. This pause expands your influence without direct confrontation. You become a reference point rather than a participant. Reference points shape movement without moving themselves. People orbit unconsciously, adjusting behavior relative to your presence. This is why confident individuals are described as intimidating. They remove emotional handles others depend on unconsciously. Without handles, manipulation attempts fail quietly. Failure creates caution, and caution becomes respect over time. Respect feels like fear when one expects emotional access. Terrifying confidence denies access without hostility or explanation. That denial preserves authority while avoiding social backlash. The mechanism is identity discipline, not emotional aggression. Discipline holds under pressure where performance collapses. Next comes how behavior aligns with this identity seamlessly. That alignment makes confidence visible without conscious effort. We move there next, where behavior locks perception permanently. Confidence becomes permanent when behavior mirrors internal control consistently. People trust patterns more than statements, promises, or emotional displays. Behavior that repeats calmly signals reliability without seeking validation. Validation-seeking behavior fractures perception and invites subtle testing. Testing escalates when boundaries feel emotionally negotiable. Terrifying confidence removes negotiation through behavioral restraint. You speak less, move slower, and act without visible urgency. Urgency communicates dependence on outcomes beyond your control. Dependence lowers perceived status in every social hierarchy. Calm pacing suggests optionality, choice, and internal leverage. Others read this pacing as certainty, even without explicit direction. Certainty without explanation unsettles those accustomed to persuasion. They cannot locate the pressure point to influence your behavior. Behavioral restraint also disrupts expectation loops others rely on. People expect reactions, follow-ups, and emotional reciprocation. When these expectations fail, cognitive tension begins forming. Cognitive tension forces reassessment of social assumptions. They start watching you instead of managing you. Observation shifts power toward the observed subject naturally. Your actions appear intentional even when minimal. Minimal action framed by consistency amplifies perceived meaning. This amplification works because humans fear hidden structure. Hidden structure implies planning, foresight, and strategic depth. You do not confirm or deny these assumptions. Silence allows others to project intelligence and authority onto you. Projection hardens perception faster than self-promotion ever could. This is why restraint beats performance long-term. Performance requires energy, reinforcement, and audience cooperation. Restraint sustains itself without external participation. Behavioral consistency also limits emotional access points. Emotional access invites influence through empathy or discomfort. Without access, attempts feel intrusive and socially risky. People withdraw instead of pressing further. Withdrawal reinforces your position without confrontation. Terrifying confidence grows when you avoid unnecessary correction. Correction signals concern over perception or misunderstanding. Concern leaks importance, which others exploit unconsciously. You allow minor misinterpretations to exist unaddressed. Unaddressed ambiguity keeps others cautious and observant. Caution stabilizes authority more effectively than clarification. This does not mean disengagement or passivity. You act decisively when action is necessary. Decisive action without emotional explanation shocks expectation systems. Shock imprints memory and reshapes future behavior around you. People remember decisive moments longer than persuasive arguments. These moments anchor your reputation silently. Reputation forms through remembered behavior, not verbal positioning. Behavioral restraint also changes how conflict unfolds around you. Conflict requires mutual emotional investment to escalate. You deny that investment by staying internally regulated. Regulation forces the other party to carry emotional weight alone. Carrying weight exhausts influence attempts quickly. They back off before confrontation becomes explicit. This withdrawal feels like intimidation from their perspective. From yours, nothing aggressive occurred. You simply refuse to play familiar emotional games. Games depend on shared rules and visible reactions. Without reaction, rules collapse and players disengage. Behavior then becomes a quiet boundary marker. Boundaries maintained without announcement command deeper respect. Announced boundaries invite challenge and testing. Silent boundaries discourage approach altogether. This discouragement locks perception into place. People begin filtering behavior automatically around you. They speak differently, hesitate longer, and choose words carefully. You did not demand this adjustment. Adjustment emerged from repeated behavioral signals over time. This is perceptual lock-in at work. Once locked, confidence no longer requires effort. It becomes a background constant others navigate around. The final layer reveals how this presence concludes interactions. That conclusion determines whether fear becomes respect or resentment. We close there next, where confidence settles permanently. Terrifying confidence completes itself when interactions end on your terms. Endings shape memory more than openings or emotional intensity. Most people overextend conversations to secure approval or emotional closure. Closure-seeking reveals need, and need erodes authority quietly. You end interactions cleanly, without justification or emotional aftercare. This signals internal completeness rather than social dependence. Completeness makes others feel unfinished by comparison. Unfinished feelings pull attention back toward you unconsciously. They replay moments, tones, and pauses searching for missed meaning. Meaning-making happens internally, strengthening your psychological footprint. You are remembered not for words, but for restraint. Restraint leaves space, and space invites reflection. Reflection deepens impact far beyond momentary emotional stimulation. This is why calm exits feel heavier than dramatic entrances. You leave without draining or extracting emotional energy. Extraction creates relief, while absence creates gravity. Gravity draws thoughts back repeatedly without visible effort. People respect what occupies mental space without demanding it. Terrifying confidence becomes a background presence in their decisions. They consider you even when you are not present. This consideration alters how they speak, act, and plan. Influence achieved without pressure sustains itself naturally. Pressure creates resistance, while gravity creates adjustment. You rely on gravity, not force, persuasion, or intimidation. This approach avoids backlash while preserving dominance. Backlash forms when people feel emotionally overpowered. Here, they feel internally exposed instead. Exposure encourages self-monitoring rather than external confrontation. Self-monitoring is the highest form of behavioral control. They regulate themselves so you do not have to. This regulation feels like fear, but functions as respect. Respect rooted in self-regulation lasts longer than fear-based obedience. Fear demands constant reinforcement and escalating displays. Terrifying confidence needs no reinforcement. It remains steady through consistency and emotional containment. Containment signals mastery over impulses others struggle to manage. People admire mastery even when it unsettles them. Unsettlement keeps boundaries intact without confrontation. You are not feared for aggression, but for composure. Composure under pressure suggests resources others lack. They imagine patience, foresight, and internal strength. Imagination fills gaps more powerfully than facts ever could. You allow imagination to work without interference. This is the final discipline most people fail to maintain. They correct perceptions to feel understood. Understanding trades mystery for comfort. Comfort invites familiarity, and familiarity erodes hierarchy. You accept being misunderstood rather than being diminished. Misunderstanding preserves distance, and distance preserves authority. Authority without hostility avoids social isolation. People remain polite, careful, and strategically respectful. They may not like you, but they will not dismiss you. Dismissal requires emotional certainty, which you never provide. Uncertainty keeps status fluid in your favor. Terrifying confidence lives inside that uncertainty comfortably. Comfort with uncertainty signals psychological maturity. Maturity intimidates those anchored in emotional reactivity. They sense limits they cannot cross safely. Limits unspoken feel stronger than rules announced. You become a boundary by existing consistently. This consistency frees you from constant self-presentation. You stop managing impressions and start setting conditions. Conditions determine outcomes more than arguments ever will. Others adapt or withdraw without conflict. Either outcome preserves your position. This is the quiet victory most never recognize. Confidence stops being something you perform or protect. It becomes the environment others must navigate. When confidence becomes environment, fear dissolves into respect. Respect becomes distance, and distance becomes leverage. Leverage grants freedom from emotional negotiation entirely. That freedom is the real reward here. Not admiration, attention, or dominance. Freedom from needing response, validation, or recognition. You move, speak, and decide without internal friction. Others feel that frictionlessness immediately. It unsettles them because it cannot be borrowed. Borrowed confidence collapses, but internal structure remains. You built structure through restraint, identity, and behavior. Now it holds without effort. This is how confidence terrifies without threatening. It simply refuses to bend. And in that refusal, it quietly governs.